Chapter 6. Relieved to find a parking space, David stepped out and breathed in salt and sea vegetation captured by the steamy haze. He embraced an inner lightness recently lacking from his existence. Though it was hard to leave Charlie behind, David now relaxed his guard without the edge of constant scorn. If a song stirred in his soul, he would sing. If his heart exulted, he'd hoot for joy. Yowzers, doesn't that smell good? John dipped his head out the passenger side and faced a luxury Laguna Beach house. Waking the locals, David? You betcha. Time to lighten up, enjoy their 5 other boys, make this the best day possible. He never dreamed of the hiking trip and aftermath draining his reserves to such a critical low, plus Charlie's abrupt issues while getting tacos made David's head spin all night. He counted on a vital boost from a low-key day in the sun. John offered a hand to Sean, who bobbed with excitement above the stoop of the sliding door. I can do it, man. Sean leapt from the van. I'm not a baby. No, definitely not. Cautious of their gear falling out, David opened the rear of the vehicle. He set his pack and the cooler on the sidewalk, then handed each boy their backpack and distributed 2 boogie boards to Moses and another to Tommy. They came up a board short. Oh well, they'd make do with 3. The sack with the Nerf ball and paddleboards he asked Leon to carry, and the netted bag of colorful toys went to Sean. John smothered the guys in sunscreen before they left West Side. Think. What else? Okay guys, gather round. He gave the spiel about staying together as they crossed the Pacific Coast Highway bustling with contagious summer thrill. Keep your arms and legs to yourself, and no monkey business. Only fun goofing around allowed. If someone's not having fun, stop. Everybody got it? He asked in a sergeant tone. Yes, they said, drawing out the holler. John eyed the neighbors and winced. Okay, so David could use a small cap on his enthusiasm, but nothing more. He'd enjoy today, whatever the circumstances. When they stepped onto the beach, Sean dropped the bag of toys, fell back, and stretched out his arms and legs as though making a snow angel. As toy pooped, he said. The other boys followed suit, dropping to their knees in the soft sand. David waved them up. We can't stop yet. People are coming and going through here. We need to find our group. Miguel flipped out both bombs. Dude, they're probably not here yet. John pointed toward the second lifeguard tower. I recognized the umbrella near our meeting spot. Hop to it, men. The ladies will think we're all wimps. The boys lagged, with sidelong glances at girls in bikinis laying out or strolling by. Sean, stop gawking and watch where you're walking, John scolded as the youngster tripped on his teal and white striped towel hanging out his half-zipped pack. David's focus blurred with his own attempts to ward off temptation. The trek took a century before reaching the West Side girls set up with large blankets, shades, 2 Diedrich iced coffee drinks on top of a cooler, and a boombox playing the alternative rock band with the sweet violins. How on earth did they get all this down here so fast? He placed the ice chest and his backpack at the edge of a blanket. The guys needed to bump up their game. Sean struggled with loosening the tie on the bag of toys, while John and the 3 older boys bounded for the waves with the boogie boards. Leon followed and stood ankle-deep in the surf, watching his housemates holler and hop around as the cool water crashed against their legs. Moses doubled back and patted his board, urging Leon to take a ride. Kudos to Moses. Every day he proved more of a gentleman. His mostly buried little sister, Danisha, looked like a sea otter floating on her back except for her myriad of black braids speckled with sand. A pint of a blonde girl poured another bucket of sand on Danisha's feet. Miguel's older sister, Anna, sat under an umbrella wearing her usual cropped men's navy slacks, a sizable chocolate sweatshirt, and eyeliner thick as a security shield. Hey Anna. Where's your staff? Asked David. With a hollow glare, she waved toward a woman lying on her belly, a towel covering her face. She must be the recent hire to replace Helena, who never would have slept on the job. John remained tight-lipped about why his girlfriend left the girls' home and West Side, or if they broke up or what. The new hire rolled on her side, revealing way too much skin. Took you guys long enough. He forgot her name, and her lingering gaze added more strain than he hoped for today. He thought the dress code banned bikinis while on duty. You ladies must have your act together to get down here so fast, David said, though he doubted her efforts deserved the compliment. From the corner of his eye, a flying object headed for his face. He blocked, and a frisbee struck his forearms, fell to the cooler, and bounced onto the blanket. Sorry. Naomi Kish waved from the surf line. His gaze latched onto John's sister, and it seemed absurd not to notice her on the beach sooner, except for David's determination to block females from sight today. But her modest swimwear eased his conscience. She broke their visual contact in the same meek manner he recalled from their youth. Weird to think of her as the same girl. She had changed in the years since their lives moved in different directions, yet remained so familiar. He stooped for the child-sized disc, then tossed it into Naomi's hands. She thanked him and returned her attention to Sean's baby sister, urging the cutie pie closer to continue their game. The black curls on the toddler's head bounced as she danced along the water's edge. An urge to pick her up and blow on her tan cheeks gripped him. He longed for a daughter, or 6, or 12. Someday? Better not to imagine, but watching the pair kindled an unbidden desire as an image of Naomi long ago in pigtails slipped behind his eyes. She held a pen poised over a journal, her head propped, and her legs stretched across her mom's living room sofa. Her Bible lay open on the coffee table. What young person not only studied scripture but wrote about it for hours? A soul-deep connection with her rushed in without asking his consent. What just happened? Some earth shift of no return shaking his world. He turned to find Sean smirking up at him. Kissy, Kissy. You like her? Who? Scary to think a 6-year-old could read such personal emotions. David had no business considering a noble daughter of God such as Naomi. Plus, his current position left no room for a serious relationship. The girl's staff who's playing frisbee with my sister. You like her, huh? Your sister? Yeah, she's cute. But you always visit her at the girl's house. What's her name again? Sean stomped his foot. Not my sister, fool. Her staff. Didn't the kid have something better to do, like build a sandcastle? Sure. Everyone likes Naomi. Agreeing seemed the quickest way to get the squirt quiet. But she's too good for me. Sean slapped the side of his swim trunks. Yeah, man. You got that right. He returned to dump the beach toys out of the bag. It stung to have the little punk agree so fast. Were David's shortcomings so obvious? Sure, his altar boy intentions stumbled around a pretty lady, so he refused to let one near enough to set off his impulses. Easy when no woman ever interested him on a personal level, but now. Suddenly the depths of Naomi captivated him, challenged his resolve. David snuck another glimpse. Prettier faces and more slender bodies lined the beach, but she shined above them all. Even Helena possessed more striking features. But last he heard, she and John remained a couple. The two of them were showing signs of heading for the altar fast until her puzzling departure from West Side. No wonder John seemed out of sorts. What happened to David's plan to enjoy a relaxing day with the boys? He grabbed a towel from his backpack and sat near Sean. So you avoided my question. What's your sister's name? Josephina Mariana Esposito. Sean ran a toy rake through the soft granules and dropped 3 pearly shells in a bucket. Pretty. And you're just Sean. Not just Sean, silly. Sean Esposito. Again, he dumped the shells out of the bucket. Josephina has a different mom. But you have the same dad? Yep. With 2 mothers and a father, what a tragedy. No other relations proved capable as guardians. Sean seemed so small and vulnerable to live in residential care, but seeing his baby sister in the girls' home broke David's heart. Thank God, she was under Naomi's capable wings. The female staff, still lying on her belly, pressed up with a grin. "Hi Brian." David turned to find their support staff approaching with a frayed bath towel draped over his shoulder and the missing boogie board under his arm. No doubt he'd appreciate a day of splashing around with the kids over his routine pages for crisis intervention at Westside. If an issue erupted, they had his immediate attention. "Hey Jill, sorry I'm late," Brian said. "That's right. Her name's Jill." David needed a trick to remember. Jill, pill? Not a gracious thought, but it might work. He gave Brian a salute. "Glad you made it with our board." "Yeah, the waves at Huntington were wicked last week." Brian set his things near the ice chest. "I planned on arriving earlier, but Ruth had me go over a few reports before I left. She's filling in back at the ranch in case there's a problem with Yahoo." Good. David wasn't alone in his concerns with the floating staff watching Charlie today. 5 or more waxy bodies came running up the shore, asking for Brian to join them in the waves. Josefina abandoned her frisbee game with Naomi, ran up, and wrapped her arms around Brian's leg. "Me ride? Please." Who could resist Josefina's precious voice? The beach local stripped his shirt, grabbed the boogie board, and took Josefina's hand. His gaze fixed on Naomi as she headed up the beach with the frisbee, and a look passed between the two, playful and familiar. Brian released what he had in tow, crouched down, then pounced, lifting Naomi's squirming body in his arms as she screamed. He ran with her into the ocean, then tossed her like an anchor from a ship. She gained her footing, while choking on seawater, then started a splash fight. Several kids joined the war. Josefina twisted her outstretched hands, yelling for Brian. Her stubby tan legs pattered up the shore as a wave came in and then she stomped the retreating bubbles with her toes. Brian had depth and class. He appeared cool and steady, but playful as well. At least the children appeared to think so, they adored him. Even Charlie chilled out with the crisis staff around. No one teased him about his obvious claim on Naomi. The two stood out as the mom and dad of every child's dreams. David's light-hearted mood vanished, and he wondered if he wanted it back. So much for his determination to enjoy the day, no matter what happened. He wanted nothing more than to take a nap, to fast forward to his time off tomorrow, and sleep through his entire break. Oddly enough, he wished he'd stayed home with Charlie today and let Fanny, the floater staff, come to the beach. This morning, while plucking at the strings of his guitar across from Charlie, David shared his heart and didn't hold back. Before long, he could lose the chance. In a gentle melody, he told of the one who aims wandering souls in the right direction, away from the bullies and the brazen, to protection, caressed in a loving shield, on solid ground, his salvation. Charlie bunched a couch cushion under one arm. Who were the bullies? The question led to the telling of times David never voiced before, not even with John. Did Charlie comprehend David's deep desire to reach him, to move past the solid wall to his heart, to glimpse beyond the behavior and connect somehow? Chapter 7. On his bed, Charlie jerked his shoulders to his ears, then down with a shiver. Side to side, he rolled his head fast on his pillow and shook his entire body to stop the crawly feelings. If the windows opened, he'd run away again. Why was Ruth still in her office on a Sunday? She'd call the cops if he used the front or back door, but what did it matter? Anything was better than this sock stench of a clink with the baby tractors on the wall and Fanny Penny, the fill-in nanny, telling him what to do. Most staff were lame, but Fanny's stinking face belonged in a toilet. Cool staff played Mario racing competitions with him, while all she said was, "Stay in your room and learn your lesson." What lesson? If he got mad, pretend to be happy? Like that was possible. "Charlie, take a shower," Fanny shouted from the bottom of the stairs. Were her legs broken or something? Then stay in your room for the rest of the night. You skipped dinner, and you're grounded, so no dessert. Grounded? Ha. System kids got held back or lost outing privileges. Only the normal kids, like on TV, got grounded. If any girl grew up normal, normal sucked, and maybe he liked his room, as far away from her as possible without going AWOL. Not so David had to force him on that stupid hike yesterday instead of letting him go to the beach. It wasn't Charlie's fault if he had problems. He hated hiking. How many times would he have to hit on the dude before he got it? Miguel talked about the ocean like it was the bomb. Charlie hated water, hated his roommate, hated everything, himself most of all, but still wished for the beach outing. David told him, "You need a day at home to come down to baseline," whatever that meant. To chill out after his problems yesterday, he guessed. He'd chill better at the beach. He hated quiet, the worst punishment in the world. Even worse than all the other stuff. He wanted to rip off his disgusting skin. What in the world made him ask about David as a kid? Not like he cared. He never cared about anybody, never, but especially not him. Seriously, the guy tried too hard and needed to back off. Except his songs were cool and so were the stories he read about magic rings transporting those kids to other worlds like Sharn. Maybe Charlie came from a cold, gray, stony place and a spacecraft transported him to this world where trick candy poisons your blood and slowly kills you from the inside. Except the castle of Queen Jada seemed old, creepy, and full of scan magic. Not that he trusted Narnia, either, but one of those time travel pools must lead to a new world where he would finally fit right in his skin and live like a normal creature. He'd forget about this place of torture, where staff like David made him stay in his room while the other boys splashed in the waves at the beach. Charlie wanted to break something, or even snap the neck of the chick downstairs like they did in the movies. She'd never notice him coming. He stood on his bed, jumped, and rammed his body into the wall. Like a caged bug, he ran across the room, hopped onto Moses' bed, and rammed into the other side. The room spun. Lights flashed. He didn't stop until he charged for the window and a dull thump jarred his brain. What the? He forgot the windows were some kind of plastic. He wanted to break glass with his skull and feel the shards sticking out of his skin. He was sick of all the scum stuck on the inside, invisible. He fell back on his bed, dizzy, then rolled over, heaving, but his stomach was empty. He spat on the carpet and screamed every dirty word in his mind. After flipping onto his back, he felt for the rock still in his pocket. How come it stopped working? What happened to the power, the force field, the strength inside to make all the sick feelings go away? Unable to escape deep down inside, like before, only one thing mattered. He must find another way, maybe a bigger rock with a stronger spell, a magic ring, or a powerful potion. Anything to make it all stop. Chapter 8. David grabbed an iced tea from the cooler and worked to keep his line of vision away from Brian and Naomi, and his mind on what mattered. He should thank Brian for sparing him from unwanted distractions, reminding him to focus on the boys even if his desire for fun evaporated along with the earlier haze and the high blazing sun. Sean crawled around nearby, collecting shells in his hands. "Want a hand there, bud?" David dropped on his towel and searched out several shells of his own. Somehow he still needed to make the most of today to store his reserves for dealing with Charlie later. He wanted a miraculous plan to manage the punk's issues. David held out his offering. "Want these?" Sean accepted, squeezing the bunch into his little fists until they dropped through his fingers. His lower lip sagged in a childlike action, yet old man lines creased the bridge of his nose. Was something else upsetting him? David popped the tab of his iced tea and took in the tang of lemon. Was it something David said? "Golly geez, I'm stuck," Danisha said with a frantic expression. She strained to wiggle her buried body. The little blonde girl had packed her in the sand tight like a mummy. "Jill. Help. You got yourself in, you can get yourself out. Jill sounded like the kids. She gave the girl a cursory glance while brushing grit from her oily arms. David wasn't so sure. Tiffany buried me, Danisha argued. David rose, then sank back as the little blonde worked to free Danisha's arm and kept digging. Everyone got themselves in a bind sometimes and needed rescuing. Some found themselves trapped in a black hole, too weary and confused to cry for help. Sometimes David wondered if Charlie lacked the vocabulary to even ask for help, growing agitated with any urge to voice his frustrations. He'd come so far since a month ago when he required coaching to communicate the most basic needs. Such progress warranted hope. Still, would the boy want to express his heart if he gained the ability? Asking for a hand would be a start. If Jill had suffered a child refusing all overtures, she might grasp the gift of one seeking help. David jolted to his feet as Danisha's shoulders trembled, and her eyes widened. Tiffany would have unburied her friend, eventually, but he gripped Danisha's wrist and forearm, then drew her out of the partial grave to her feet. "Oh good Lord," she said, standing stiff as a plank with her legs spread. She scrutinized the white particles clinging to her dark skin and whimpered. Tiffany tugged her toward the water. "Let's go wash off." Jill gazed up at him. "Girls." Helpless and whiny. She raised her hand as if making a point. "You're lucky you work with boys." If she disliked the position so much, what motivated her to take the job? Better that she spare the children her lessons about how adults don't care, so they're on their own. Jill set her elbows on her knees. "So are you guys coming to our 4th of July party on Friday?" Their party? So she assumed the girls put on the annual barbecue because of the location. He pressed past his irritation. It took time for recruits to get with the program. Guess no one explained to her they switched homes each year. Whatever. David still felt like a rookie. He returned to his towel, resolved to let the day play out, accepting what he wanted to avoid. "Ruth gave us our usual list of responsibilities," he said. "We'll be there." "Anna's birthday is on the 4th, Jill said, turning toward the girl. "Right, Anna?" The teen put her head back and closed her eyes. In obvious dismissal, Jill flipped her hand. "Anna and Miguel will visit their dad in prison that afternoon, then return for the party." David frowned and shook his head to warn her off the subject, but she went on as if Anna and others nearby heard nothing, even as a nearby mother stared at the tough girl while wrapping a shivering child in a towel. Anna hunched her shoulders to her ears. How humiliating for her, and she appeared to prefer boredom at home to a day at the beach. Sean sifted through the shells and rocks, showing no actual interest. What set him in such a solemn state? David leaned back on his hands and replayed their earlier interaction. He teased Sean about his name, said something about his mother giving him a simple name compared to the name given to his sister by a different mother. Was that it? Josephina Mariana Esposito rang with purpose and traditional attention to poetic flow and beauty. Sean Esposito, with no middle name, implied a heedless decision while filling out a birth certificate. A sudden recollection of why Sean might withdraw from a little teasing made David want to double-kick himself. Was his forgetfulness a sign of his heart growing cold? He knew better than to poke fun about something so personal as a name. Miguel sauntered up from the shore, dripping wet, his youthful chest puffed with mischief. He dropped his boogie board and shoved Sean over from behind. Sean's face landed in the sand. He shook free and choked as he inhaled the fine granules near his mouth and nose. "Miguel." David sat up and forced a rein on his tone. He despised bullying. "What on earth do you think you're doing?" Miguel passed by, then turned with a smirk. Sean recovered his breath, his little lips spouting the language of a ticked-off gangster. He grabbed a fistful of sand and threw it at Miguel, but it blew back in Sean's face. "You did it to yourself that time," Miguel said with a laugh. Sean blinked and rubbed his eyes while his lips trembled angrily. He shot up, wrapped his arms around Miguel, and ran fingernails across the older boy's sides. Miguel pushed the younger boy on his backside. Sean picked up his quivering body, storming toward the bluffs. The nearby mother grabbed her bundled-up child and her bag, drew up a woven blanket with a quick shake, then moved to another area. It all happened so fast. It was David's job to defend the lives in his care and conquer any loss of boundaries, but it took a calm head. He had to restrain his instinct to press Miguel's face in the sand until he moaned for mercy. Chapter 9. Sean was out of area, but otherwise safe, sitting on a clump of layered sand, stones, and seashells. Best to deal with Miguel. What was this tendency to torque off the other kids, often targeting Charlie and Sean? David held out his hands. "Let me see those scratches." Crimson lines stretched across his sides. The salt in the seawater was the best cure. Still, better to add antiseptic or receive flak for an injury report without treatment. "I'll get a first aid kit." "He's such a brat." Miguel inspected the wound for himself. The preteen had a history of stirring the pot, asking for retaliation, then playing the victim. His lip remained swollen and purple from Charlie's apparent revenge last night. "This will sting a little." The kid flinched as David applied the swab. "Have a seat, please." "Why? Am I in trouble? What did I do?" Miguel sat far enough away to make a private discussion impossible. David moved his towel closer and sat cross-legged. "You tell me. What happened?" as Sean was sitting there minding his own business. "I dunno." As David's impatience threatened to spew, his grip tightened on his ankle. "I was just thinking, Sean looks upset, and what he needs is a good friend. Then you show up kicking and shoving. We've talked before about you provoking other kids and bullying them when they're vulnerable." Miguel jerked back his chin. "What are you talking about? What's vulnerable?" "It means easy to attack, or using a person for your own purposes or pleasure. It's a terrible feeling when someone hurts you just for fun. Perhaps it's happened to you." Miguel dropped his gaze. "Maybe." He studied the insides of a half-mussel shell with attentive scrutiny. "My dad used to hit me for no reason." Heart-aching, David saw the scene all too well. Jesse never hit him for no reason, nor noticed his existence, but his older brothers found some sort of challenge in provoking a rise out of him. They never tired of the game, even though he saw no point in reacting, and it took mistreatment of the family dog to flare David's anger. Still, most of their cruelty centered on him and took place behind closed doors, with Jesse looking the other way. His adolescent mind worked to rationalize the abuse as normal, yet he knew it wasn't right. The law of justice, written on every soul, wages war against the discrepancies in life and seeks an answer. The family priest, Father Sam, filled David's soul with goodness and love, but questions always darted through his brain. Why the ongoing inequities? The bigger, stronger, more powerful are to care for the downcast, not exploit for further gain. Parents are supposed to shelter, not neglect or harm their children. In his weakened state, David's care offered a small upgrade. He expected a stronger impact considering his spiritual growth at the parish and experience leading adventure challenge camps for youth caught up with inner-city gangs. Why his Jewish father embraced the Catholic faith was a mystery, but Jesse made sure his boys were in the pews every Sunday, even consented with Father Sam to send David out from under his altar boy obligations and into the ministry for the troubled youth in L.A. Over and over he watched victims turn into victimizers, the sins of the parents falling on the children who then seek a reason for the senseless acts done to them, desperate to understand. Was it possible? He puzzled over himself, and his childhood had fewer complications. When would Jehovah Shua, the savior of the world, stop the madness? Someday he'd return to the parish with his questions for Father Sam. David pressed his finger to Miguel's knee. "I bet your dad took a few beatings himself as a kid and carried on the tradition, but you can decide to change." David once made that choice for himself and determined that no child under his care would ever feel invisible, devalued, or good for only cooking, cleaning, and reporting his older siblings' business on the Air Force Base? Was he blowing it? Miguel blinked several times and hung his head. What do you think Sean needs? David prodded. Only God knew how to uplift a 5-year-old who lost his mother in a gang shooting 2 years ago, but Miguel's cruelty needed to stop here, otherwise, a painful loss of privileges was in order. Miguel flicked at his lower lip. You think I owe an apology? An apology matters little unless you mean it. What honest action can you take to help Sean? Say sorry for kicking him? Anything else? Miguel gazed up as a seagull squawked and flew by. Sorry for laughing at you. The bird landed near a couple of preschoolers. One chased the bird away. After his balk at making apologies, David questioned Miguel's sincerity. Sounds good. Anything else? I know, I'll ask him to be my friend, Miguel said with no sarcasm in his tone. David beamed. Come on, let's go do it. The earlier thrill for the day returned. If only Charlie moved past his wall long enough to talk through his struggles like this, even once. Time for David to center his focus, resist distractions, and make his intentions clear for the team, starting with John once the boys were in bed. Only 5 days remained for him to get there. Unless. Could he talk the county worker into giving them until after the holiday weekend? She wouldn't want to come on Friday the 4th of July, anyway. God, please not as soon as Thursday. David chased his 5 boys back into the water, determined to burn out their energy. After a full day in the sea and sun, there must be fatigue in their bones somewhere. The girls had packed their beach gear an hour ago, said goodbye, and headed out, with Brian toting their ice chest. As the Earth's orbiting star sank into the distant sea line, David rounded the shivering boys from the rhythmic tide, urged them up the vacated shore, and handed out the extra towels. Miguel, Sean. Please pack up the sand toys. Instead, they hugged their towels and huddled around John, roasting a marshmallow over his backpacking stove. Dude, what are you doing? David asked. John sandwiched the marshmallow between 2 half-gram crackers, added a chocolate bar from his pack, and handed the s'more to David. He hesitated before accepting the treat, but a whiff of the roasted sweetness weakened his resistance. Your sugar high sabotages my efforts toward submission at bedtime. I want one. Tommy scooted closer and John waved him back from the stove. A convulsive chill set David's teeth chattering more than his moist skin warranted. He hated this apprehension of returning to Westside and fought to tame the trembles before they grew obvious. Sean shot his hand in the air. Ooh. Me too. David handed over his snack and breathed out the dread, allowing warm thoughts of a real campfire to calm his trembles. Every day, young, traumatized minds encountered haunting fears as the distractions of the day faded with the light. He understood John's reluctance to end the entertainment, and the laughter and reminiscing of the day, as they gathered around the gas-driven flame, brought a joyous conclusion to the summer outing. Kids being kids. In the light of dusk, the boys rinsed off and brushed their teeth in the outdoor showers, then put on their sweats or pajamas in the changing room. David popped a cassette recording in the van stereo with a few of his smooth-picked guitar tunes. The boys' silent eyes peered out at city lights, their profiles aglow as street lamps passed. David stopped in their drive for John to open the garage, then parked inside, triggering the overhead sensor light. Sluggish bodies trudged out of the van. Straight to bed with you, David said, knowing the hand slap landed on him and John for any grumpy kids at summer school tomorrow. They tracked in through the kitchen to blaring theatricals booming from the TV speakers, molesting the peace of the drive home. John ushered the boys towards the stairs in a rush, and David hoped their exhaustion knocked them out fast. Charlie's frozen position in front of the TV with remote in hand foreshadowed the climax of their day. Determination welled in David's spirit, Much like his first commitment to lead challenge camps for LA gang kids over 7 years ago. Whatever it took to reach Charlie, he couldn't bear the thought of saying goodbye, having never reached the kid. Not where it counted. Ruth must have left since she forbade screen entertainment past 8 p.m., much less a horror movie unsuitable for a susceptible teen. The office light beamed into the front room. He found Fanny sitting at the computer playing Tetris and tapped the wall. "Hey, we're back. Where's Ruth?" Fanny closed the game and spun in the chair. "She went home hours ago. Her husband needed her." "Gotcha. How'd it go with Charlie?" Better for her to explain before he jumped to conclusions. Fanny stood and grabbed her bag. "Nothing to report." "What's Charlie watching?" David gripped the door jamb, wondering if his irritation showed. Her eyes rose to the ceiling. "Does it matter? He's old enough to decide for himself." Her attitude wasn't helping. "For future reference, we monitor everything the kids watch. Only PG or G. I'm sorry, we should have made our standards clear." Though she knew of Charlie's total restrictions from screen entertainment, so they thought the rule irrelevant for tonight. "Okay, whatever." David set aside his desire to drill her, dropped his arm, and allowed her to pass. "How'd Charlie do today?" She released a heavy exhale and turned back to face him. "Fine, until an hour ago." "What happened?" Her gestures implied the information was obvious. "He was having problems in his room, okay. Like, banging and stuff. I told him he could watch TV if he knocked it off." "Why was he banging?" "Do I look like I graduated with a doctorate in psychology?" David didn't need this. "Anyone can ask what's wrong," he said. Including 3-year-old Josefina when she noticed how miserable Anna appeared while sitting in the scorching sun with her long sleeves and pants. Relationships are key when working with kids. Nothing about relationships in the job description. Her thumb tapped the strap of her bag. "We're to meet the children's needs. Everyone needs relational interaction." He gave a wave. "Thanks for filling in last minute. We appreciate you coming." She tugged her bag higher on her shoulder and headed out the front door. Not one of his better moments. He was tired, and she was. Ugh. Besides the mess she left in the kitchen, she had no awareness of the disaster sitting on the living room couch, waiting to happen. Dread washed over David, reminding him of the swell he missed while body surfing earlier. He only needed to get Charlie to bed. Nothing more. With a sway of fatigue, he shuffled down the dark hall toward the flashing lights of the movie on TV. Chapter 10. David squatted by the arm of the sofa and raised his voice above the cinema noise. "Hey bud. How's it going?" The screen flashed across Charlie's frozen stare, his expression brittle as ice. A nudge might shatter him to pieces. "It's time to turn the TV off." The remote sat motionless in the teen's pale fingers. "Charlie, are you okay?" Not unusual for him to enter his zone, but pulling him out never bode well. David called louder. "Earth to Charlie." He waved. Still nothing. The dark symphony of suspense urged David to grab the TV controller from the boy's hand and shut it off. But he resisted and risked a slight touch on the shoulder. Startled, Charlie snapped from the trance and dug his teeth into David's forearm like a repeat from the other night. David restrained an urge to yell. When would he learn to keep his limbs away from the kid's mouth? David pressed in his arm, rolled down and out, freeing himself according to his training. Charlie dropped the remote, flung out clawed fingers, and came at David with an unearthly growl. With the advantage of his slightly taller height and longer limbs, David shoved Charlie's shoulder, spinning him to face the other direction. Charlie returned with increased speed and flailing fists. David needed support, now. He yelled for John just as Charlie landed a kick right where it counted. Nausea rose in David's throat. God help him, or he'd strangle the boy. With non-stop kid action for over 15 hours, and drained by hours in the sun, he had nothing left. Charlie stood, panting, ready for attack. John arrived and scanned the situation. Bent in pain, David pointed to the controller on the floor. "Turn off the noise," he managed. John retrieved the remote and silenced the symphony of gunshots and loud booms. The room darkened to a faint outline of objects from the office light down the hall. Chest heaving with animalistic breaths, Charlie seemed lost in a wolf-infested forest, then snapped into full attack mode. David saw it coming. He waved his comrade into action. "Now, John." They seized Charlie on opposite arms and grappled to move the teen into a standing hold, positioning his mouth, fists, and fingernails in a pose to prevent further harm. Perverse words poured from Charlie's throat in between. "Let me go." John gave David a nod to take the lead. "Lord. It's not in me." But protocol required one of them to talk through the restraint. His experience showed the irrationality of an angry child, so David chose his words with caution, simple prose laced with love. Charlie thrashed his weight around, threatened, and demanded his release. "You're okay, Charlie," David murmured as if handling an injured sparrow. "You're safe. Please, calm down." The guy was too worked up to hear anything more complicated. "You're hurting my arm. Let me go." Charlie's mouth went off. David battled to keep his grip and stance steady. "Stop struggling and it won't hurt." But the tussle continued, it seemed, for hours. If not for the teen's stunted stature for his age, they might have had to call the police. John's arms shook. David's low back burned. He wished they'd called the police after all. They hadn't even paged Brian. It was too late now. Releasing Charlie before he calmed down could put them all at risk for injury, but they couldn't hold out much longer, and the kid had sat around all day, storing plenty of energy. From somewhere beyond David, a new melody flowed through his mind without thought, and new lyrics poured out his lips. "Blessed rock, Adonai. Rest lies under you, and I hide. I sing new and true. Into your arms, take me now." The song filled the air with a calming aura, delivering them from deep waters. Their salvation was at hand. The words came without effort, for he possessed only the strength to stand. Charlie's struggle went on, but the altercation slowed. His writhing limbs weakened. At last, he stilled. Spare fragile ears from deception. Break open the prisons, set innocents free. From scheming lips, take them now. Charlie's weight hung, leaning into David's side. If they released their hold, he'd collapse to the ground. Still, false ends fooled them before, and the entire thing started over. From waves and torrents, raise him, lift him higher. From snares of destruction, spare him now. Overheated and exhausted, David talked Charlie through the release until he stood on his own, straight and still. The silence sent a soothing wave of relief over his worn-out body, mingled with a potent desire for sleep. It wasn't over. David flipped on the porch light and opened the sliding door. To his surprise, Charlie followed. Beads of perspiration dotted his hairline. They all needed recovery time. And to cool off. "I'm thirsty," Charlie said in a complacent tone. John aimed for the kitchen. "I'll grab some water." David sat on the porch step, and Charlie joined him. John handed a cup down to both of them and took a seat on the other side of Charlie. "Wanna take off your sweatshirt and cool down?" "No." Sandwiched between his two staff, Charlie took a steady drink. David sighed. "Charlie, when you were watching the movie, could you hear me trying to get your attention?" Charlie tilted his head. David set his cup on the patio. "I was talking and waving my hand, but you stared without responding." "I don't remember." "Do you know what upset you?" Charlie dropped his face to his knees and trembled. "Hey man, it's okay." David pinched the moisture from his eyes. The remaining water in Charlie's cup spilled on the concrete, and he swiped his face with his sweatshirt. David held Charlie's shoulder with a soft squeeze. "What is it?" "In the movie, A bear bigger than this house came out of nowhere and attacked. It made me remember something. Charlie shivered. Are you cold? No. The boy wiped his nose with his wrist. What memory came to your mind? I was on the streets. Then, somehow, I ended up alone in this room with boards on the windows. The bearman took my brother and Till. Charlie hid his face in his shirt. Aaron got in on it. With a hairy man. They'd hit me up, you know, with drinks and stuff, and take me places. Men. Did things. His broken voice came muffled through his hoodie with a line of foul language. No profane word existed to describe such a horror. Only groanings God alone understood. David held his stomach. How had Charlie survived? Had he kept silent about it all until now? With an arm around the boy, David squeezed, cautious of any resistance or discomfort with the gesture. Charles Shipley, you are a special young man, innocent of the evil done to you. Charlie sank his thin frame against him. But I didn't fight. I should have said no, stayed strong, not all stupid scared. David released the embrace and faced him. Charlie, it's not your fault this happened. Do you understand? I tried to run. I tried and tried. I found a way out, but it's still. I'm bad. I deserved it. Any day he'll bring me back. I should leave now and get it over with. Charlie shrugged off David's hand and stood. No. David used his sharp tone. He knew the irrational thoughts of a troubled mind. Evil prowled, searching out the susceptible, whispering dangerous misperceptions. Charlie, listen to me. The boy dropped back to the step. David kneeled on the cement, facing Charlie. Don't listen to thoughts of defeat. You're not on your own anymore. We care about you and will do all we can to protect you. They could keep him safe. Couldn't they? If only he'd stay under their protection and not run away. David held Charlie's knee. The awful feelings come from the evil forced upon you. They're evil. Not yours. Like an innocent dove shot down by a fool, evil has wounded you. The boy's vague disclosure may have only scratched the surface. No wonder rage stewed inside him. David dipped lower and glimpsed Charlie's crumpled expression. Listen, telling yourself you did something wrong to deserve the abuse is like flapping a broken wing. It can't heal that way. It only hurts and gets worse. Charlie might not want to hear it, but only God could understand. We love you and your Creator loves you. The love God intends for you is your best medicine. Can I pray for you? Charlie pushed his hood back. If you want. John placed light fingers on the boy's arm, while David clutched his other hand. Lord, you understand what Charlie is going through. You feel all his pain, cry the same tears. Show him the truth about real life and your great love, how you delight in him. Help him find his home with you. David stood and opened his arms. The responsibility to remain trustworthy weighed with full force as Charlie came to him, leaning in for an embrace. Lord, keep me from screwing up. David pulled back. Tired? Yes. Charlie and John spoke in unison and laughed. John ruffled the boy's hair and tugged him in for a second hug. A fierce paternal instinct rose as David squeezed the back of Charlie's neck. Ready for bed? It appeared Fanny neglected to have Charlie shower and change out of his dirty clothes. Irked by the lack of care, David rationalized one missed shower and teeth brushing wouldn't hurt. The boy needed a good night's sleep. Charlie stepped inside, then peered over his shoulder. David, will you play your guitar in the hall until I fall asleep? Love to. They had penetrated Charlie's relational wall of steel, but was it enough for Charlie to accept their care and stop running? John tapped David on the head. When you're done, we need to talk. Yes, they needed to talk about way too much to discuss tonight. David swayed with fatigue and forced his eyes wide. What was so important that John couldn't wait until morning? With a slow nod, David pressed himself up to his room for his guitar.